So I want to explain really quickly that my webcam on my laptop is not very good. The video is going to be lagging a lot and it's just not going to look good. Um, but I wanted to include it so that you guys could somewhat see me. I thought it was too important to leave my face out on something like this. It's unfortunate, and I'll probably do it over again in the future, but just listen to it, and if you want to watch it lag a lot, then you can do that as well, but this is just going to be on my channel for the time being, so you guys can get a better understanding of where I'm coming from. Anyway, enjoy the testimony. So, I grew up in a Christian home. And you might be thinking, oh, you're only a Christian because you were raised in a Christian home. But that's the genetic fallacy. If you don't know what that is, basically, just because you were told by your parents that something is true and you believe it to be true, and then someone says, oh, you only believe that to be true because your parents told you that, that doesn't negate the truth of a statement just because your parents told you that. You can look more at the genetic fallacy. That was just a quick summary, but anyway, I went to church every Sunday. We prayed every day. We read the Bible every once in a while, but it was a Christian home, and I'm very thankful for that because a true Christian home means you have loving parents and they know how to parent pretty well. At least that was my experience in a Christian home. My parents were loving, my siblings were loving. There was always fights here and there, but that's just siblings and parents. You know, there's always going to be conflict in a household. But at the end of the day, there was never a moment in my life where I did not feel loved. And that's really a main benefit of being in a Christian home, a true Christian home, was I just never felt like I needed to truly earn my love. A lot of people out there think that love is earned, but it comes with time, obviously, but there's always just that innate love that you should have. A parent has for the child has for the parent. And of course, there's always going to be situations where, you know, you feel like you've been betrayed by a parent. Not saying that your feelings are invalid, but when you love someone, it shouldn't be because they do stuff for you. It's basically what I'm saying. And that's just what it was when I was young, and I'm very thankful for that. But I didn't really understand that. I took love for granted. But that's just not how society works. So anyway, let me get back to the beginning of the story, which was obviously being raised in a Christian home and going to church. And my relationship with Christianity was, if I believe in Jesus, then I go to heaven. And that's about it. Don't read your Bible, don't really pray, don't really pay attention in church, because the most important thing is John 3:16. If you know John 3:16, then that means you get to go to heaven. But that's not real Christianity either. John 3:16 is a great verse. Many of you probably know it even if you aren't Christians. But if you are a Christian, you definitely know this verse. Probably heard it a million times by now. But that's just where I was for majority of my Christian life, was believe in Jesus, get to go to heaven. That's it. Didn't care about much else. So eventually we moved. So I had lived in a small town, tight-knit community, friends, you know, everyone in town pretty much went to church. And if they didn't go to church, they didn't really care if you were a Christian. That was kind of just the expectation around my town. But we moved. And we moved to South Carolina. That lasted for 6 months. while we were there, nothing in particular happened with my faith. We tried a bunch of different churches that were gigantic, which was a big step up from the small town I had lived in. And, I don't really remember much of that time in South Carolina at all. It was pretty not rememberable. Don't know what else to say about it. I just can't. We were there for 6 months. Can't really remember anything about it. School was gigantic. Teachers liked me because I wasn't insane like all the other kids in the class. But beyond that, it was a short stint in my life, and it happened. But it was the results of what happened after that move that really dictated a lot of my life and my journey in Christianity. So we moved back to Illinois, but we don't move back to the town that we lived in previously. We actually move in with my grandparents because we didn't have any money. And again, this is the benefit of being in a Christian family. It wasn't, well, you need to do this or you need to do that. It was just, you guys are struggling. We're going to let you live with us for as long as you need to. And I know other families do that. They don't have to be Christian families, but it was just, everyone was so loving in my family. But when we moved in with my grandparents, we lived near the town we used to live in, so we went back to the church we used to go to, and I made some really great friends there while I was staying at my grandparents', and in my mind at the time, I was thinking, this is going to last forever. But no, you can't just live with your grandparents forever. So eventually, my dad got a new job, started making more money, and we moved out. And this is where, the real testimony begins, because all that stuff leading up to this, I was Christian in the sense that I went to church, I believed it to be true, didn't really meet any conflict in my life with atheists or anything like that, so I was fine with, my faith at the time. I guess I should also mention that my grandpa died while we were staying with my grandparents. It was on my mom's side. My mom's dad died, but we were staying with my dad's parents, so we weren't in the house with my grandpa that had passed away. And that was my first experience with death. Didn't know anyone that had died previously, obviously. I mean, I'd heard people who passed away, but I didn't know them. But when my grandpa died, I didn't understand it. I think that's everyone's first experience with death, especially when you're young. You don't really get it. It wasn't until we were out in Colorado for his funeral where I finally realized, my grandpa's gone. You can't talk to him anymore. He can't talk to you. And that was my first experience of well, what if there is nothing after death? Is my grandpa gone? He doesn't remember any of us? He doesn't remember growing up, his family, his brother, marrying my grandma? Does he remember my mom and us? And that's what kind of spooked me a little bit about death, was, well, what if there is no afterlife? And you are truly forgotten in the sense that you don't remember who you are. And that scared me, but at the time, I was definitely, more of a Christian. I said, my grandpa was a Christian. He knew who Christ was. He's in heaven. He's looking down on us, and he's fine. He remembers us. And so I kind of just put that off to the side, understand a little bit more about death, but, kind of kept that same perspective of, Christianity's true. Anyway, so the real testimony begins when I made it to high school. We had moved into a new town 2 hours away from the town that we I first grew up in. And at first, it was fine. We didn't really have a church, but we would get there eventually. The unfortunate part of this story was, after moving so many times, I hated making friends again. It was really hard for me to do it again. So there was this guy that I met in 8th grade that immediately, I don't know why he did this or why I even let this happen or let him even trick me, but I knew him for 2 weeks. We had a group project in my history class to do, and I went over to his house. And we did the group project together. I thought he was a pretty good guy. He was just chill, made some funny jokes every once in a while, and eventually I would stay over after we worked on the project to hang out. And we went to play basketball one night, and he says to me, even after knowing you for 2 weeks, you're my best friend. Because all the other friends I had, we haven't spent this much time together. So I know him for 2 weeks, he tells me I'm his best friend. And that felt really good, just because I knew I had experienced how hard it was to make friends over and over and over again. And hearing that was like, okay, I'm set. I got a friend group. Apparently I have a best friend now, and I can just coast through however long we're staying here with these friends. But eventually, there was one Christmas where so my brother had gotten a cross necklace for Christmas one year. The next year, I was treating Christianity like a level up kind of thing. This is how old you are when you do communion. This is how old you are when you get baptized. This is how old you are when you get your cross necklace. Or your first Bible, that kind of stuff. Like, it was this constant leveling up of, now you can do more as a Christian because you're older, and that kind of stuff. So when my brother got his cross necklace last year, I was like, you know what? I want to get my cross necklace because that's the next level in Christianity. So I get the cross necklace for Christmas, and I really wish I listened to my brother when he said this to me. He said, I hope you're getting that cross because you really believe, Joe. And I said, yeah, I do. And I really thought I did at the time. So I got the cross necklace for Christmas. The next school semester begins. And I'm sitting in my study hall with that friend I mentioned earlier. And he sees me wearing the cross necklace. And he asks me, are you wearing that cross necklace for style, or do you really believe in Christianity? And that was the first time I had ever been challenged in my entire life on Christianity. Because even if people didn't believe, they still respected it. And so I just was a little confused, looked at him like, yeah, I'm really a Christian. What do you mean by that? For the next 5 minutes, he hit me with all the Reddit atheism and Richard Dawkins atheism and, Christopher Hitchens atheism. And he basically called me an idiot for believing what I believe. And he also told me that my parents had tricked me into believing. So he committed the genetic fallacy back then. Didn't understand the genetic fallacy back then, but it was a 5-minute discussion. Couldn't have been more. But I genuinely couldn't remember a lot of what he told me. Just a lot of the stuff that he said related to a lot of that atheism, the stupidity of Christianity. But ultimately, I can't remember exactly what he told me. But I do know that when I left that class, that study hall, I was not a Christian anymore. I continued to believe because my parents believed. I continued to believe because I was afraid of hell. I didn't want to go to hell. I want to go to heaven. And if I stop believing, then that means I'm going to go to hell, that kind of stuff. So I ignored it. I just was like, he's wrong. Why is he wrong? I don't know. But I'm going to ignore it and move on with my life and hopefully he'll leave me alone about that stuff. And he did for the most part. I never wore my cross necklace outside of my shirt. So that had happened. I kept my cross necklace in my shirt, and I continued to go through high school, and that I'll say that that's probably when I truly became depressed. I know that my mom's probably gonna watch this, and she gets really, really upset. I had given my testimony just a few months ago, got baptized a few months ago. I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but you know where this story's going anyway. But she gets really upset when I talk about this, but that's probably when it began, simply because I had lost hope and I didn't realize that. I believed what my friend said because I didn't have any way to refute him. And so I just never talked about Christianity again, never mentioned it, and that was that. He continued to mock me every once in a while, didn't really care. Eventually the friendship just imploded. Can't even tell you what happened. He seemed to get really, really hostile towards me when he found out I was a Christian. Eventually he kicked me out of the friend group, and I had no friends, and that's really when things started to get bad for me. I remember thinking one night, am I depressed? And then my immediate reaction was, no. Depression is for people who cry a lot. I'm not crying. So I can't possibly have depression. And on top of that, my family is so loving. My brothers are so loving. I have a good home life. Depression is for people who are abused. And I'm not being abused. I have a really loving family. I couldn't possibly be depressed. But it wasn't until a few years later that I can't remember what I was watching or hearing. Someone had said to me, depression isn't being sad all the time. Depression is you feel nothing. You don't feel sad, you don't feel happy. You have no desires, no hopes, no dreams, no ability to even correct yourself. It's just a constant state of laying there and thinking about, well, nothing. The only thing that you can do to make you happy, whatever that was. For me, it was YouTube. The only thing that would make me happy is YouTube. I hated school, hated not having friends, and having to go to school, and so I just would come home, not really try on my homework, and then sit there, watch YouTube, and do nothing besides that, because I didn't want to do anything. So I didn't realize I was depressed at the time. I said I realized later. I didn't realize it at the time. I didn't know what to do. It didn't make any sense to me because my view of depression was not accurate. I was ignorant. So I went through high school. By the time my senior year came around, I had made new friends, and these were good friends. Like, I feel bad that I was, like I said, I was depressed, and it took me a while for me to really become friends with these guys. I should have done it sooner. He was in my physics class. He was a really great guy, but I just took a little bit of time to kind of open myself up to friendship again, because I was just so demoralized at that time. But senior year rolls around, I'm feeling a lot better, have friends, and can really start enjoying school again. And that's the unfortunate thing about depression, is to get out of depression, you have to do the stuff that you have no motivation to do. And it's really, really difficult. But I eventually made it out, and I'm good now. But what ended up happening was I associated a lot of my struggle in life with school. So I had the opportunity to graduate early, and I took it. I had to take one extra English credit, and I was out. So, the first semester ends of my senior year, and I'm graduated. I'm done. But the unfortunate thing was that was in 2019. 2020 comes around. I'm now graduated out of high school, but I was still talking with my friends, spending time with them, and I was taking an online course at a community college. And you all know what happened in 2020. The COVID hit, and that was another point in my life that kind of just wrecked things. I can't really say that I hated it, because even at that time I was struggling to want to get out and do stuff. So I was really really kind of happy when COVID happened. But looking back, it really derailed the direction of my life. But I'm also thankful for it. Don't really know where I would be at if it hadn't happened. It's impossible to say, but what ended up happening was I decided to go to college online. I knew that it doesn't matter where I go, I'm going to end up online. So I go to college online, and I don't want to say it was a complete mistake, but because I like going to college online. It's good. I can kind of go at my own pace, and hopefully it will allow me to do more YouTube because I'm online. But it was just an unfortunate circumstance. And because of COVID, I pretty much lost all my friends. They were doing their own thing. I was doing my own thing, and didn't really have good opportunity to meet up and interact. And eventually college happened, and everyone was locked down, or they went to college but then got sent back home. Whatever happened, everyone was basically locked away, as you know. Eventually, though, I was sitting in I think it was my dad's office. He had a couch there, and my dad wasn't home. I was just sitting on the couch with my dog, actually. And I was scrolling on TikTok. Don't have TikTok anymore. Can't stand that app. It just drains your day away. But I was scrolling on TikTok, going through, the motions. I'm pretty sure it was my spring break. And I was sitting there watching a TikTok of, I'll put them in the description and the top comment probably, or the pinned comment I should say. But I was watching this guy named Cliffe, and I know he's debated a lot of atheists. A lot of atheists don't like him, but I was listening to him debate college students about Christianity. And I saw that video, and something really hit me after I watched that video, which was, I think that my depression is being caused by my fake faith in Christianity. Because even though things had gotten cleaned up for me, it was ultimately that conversation I had with my friend in study hall that made me lose my faith in Christianity. But for years after that, I just pretended to be a Christian. I didn't believe anymore, and I was forcing myself to live a life of... If you are a Christian, then you understand what it's like to be living under the law. At some point, even to this day, you might still be living under the law. And for atheists that are watching this that don't really understand what that means, basically, every single moment of your life, you have this dread as a Christian that God is just going to crush you from heaven the moment that you sin. And that's how a lot of Christians live. And it's unfortunate because if you don't read the Bible closely, if you just read the New Testament alone, you would understand that's not what God is at all. And I'll get into that later on in different videos, but for now, I just want you to know that if you're a Christian living under the law and you felt like me, where every moment just felt like you were about to be cast into hell because you broke the law, and then you have to go pray now, and if you don't pray, then, and if you die, you're going to hell. That's not at all what Christianity is, and like I said, I'll get into all of that later on in different videos, but at that point in my life, that's what I believed, was I'm going to go to hell the moment I sin, and if I die without praying, I'm going to go to hell. And so that's just how I was living. I think it's in Galatians, Paul writes that living under the law is death. And that's what I was living. I was living under the law. I was living in death. So when I saw that video, I decided to make an effort for once to figure out, is Christianity even true? I mean, I've been coasting for, I don't know, since the beginning of my life. I've been just going with the flow. But what if my parents were wrong? Like, you know, on a topic like God, you can't say God for sure exists, and you can't say God for sure does not exist. And I think every person needs to ask themselves the question, does God exist or does God not exist? It's, I think, essential for how you build your worldview. That's what I believe now. At that time, I was like, I just want to figure this out so I can move on with my life, either as an atheist or as a Christian. I didn't really care that much. I just wanted it to be over. So I listen to Cliffe a little bit more, but then I thought to myself, if I really want to make a decision here, I gotta listen to some atheists as well. So I listened to Christian and atheist debate. And I did that for probably 2 days, and eventually I was walking up the stairs to my room, and I remember my dad telling me once, or let me actually go back. I was listening to those debates, and I didn't really side with either one, because you're debating the concept of God. And I just said it previously, you can't prove it either way. So how do you make a decision on something you can't prove? And that's where a lot of atheists come from. They say since you can't prove it, it's kind of illogical to believe in it. But you can't prove it either way. So I think you can make the argument it's illogical to believe either way. You can't disprove God's existence and you can't prove it. So there was one thing, like I'll get back to where I was just a few moments ago. I was walking up the stairs to my bedroom, and my dad once told me, if you want God to speak to you, then pray and read your Bible. Up until that moment in my life, my prayers were out of fear and my Bible reading was out of, what's the word? Not obligation, but basically every time my mom wanted me to read the Bible, I would have to read it, and I didn't really like it. So when I remembered that, my dad told me that like years ago, but when I remembered that, I was like, okay, if I pray and read my Bible, like, I should get something out of that, right? If God truly exists, and my dad says, if you want God to speak to you, if God speaks to you, that's pretty good evidence that God exists, considering he just spoke to you. So that's what I decided to do. I just opened up my Bible to Genesis chapter 1, and I was like, I'll read a chapter every day. one chapter a night. And then for a little bit, I didn't really understand how to pray. But then I realized that I'm talking to God here. And I'm trying to figure out if he's real. So why don't I just ask him? I said, God, if you're real, show me who you are. And I prayed that prayer pretty much every night. Or a prayer like, God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me. Something like that. And that was just kind of what I was feeling. I didn't really know how to pray, didn't really know what to ask, but that's what I did. And I made it 20 chapters into Genesis, and I prayed that prayer every night. And then after I prayed it, the God, if you're real, reveal yourself to me, that prayer, I was laying in my bed and I had no response. For 20 nights, no response, no change in opinion or mind or heart or anything like that. And I was laying in my bed trying to figure out, should I give up? I mean, I did have this thought of like, well, I've been ignoring, if God does exist, I've been ignoring God for, at this point, 18 years in my life. Like, I guess you can't really count the time that you're like 1 year old, but I was going to church since I could walk, even before I could walk. So I had been ignoring God for that long. It's been 20 days. I think God has some of a right to like ignore me a little bit. Don't want to make God out to be petty, but that's just kind of how it felt when I was thinking in the moment of giving up. Trying to give God the benefit of the doubt, I guess. But after I thought that, I had this strange realization where I was kind of getting a little bit mad because I'm like, why am I trying to give God the benefit of the doubt if God is the one that wants me to love him? I'm trying to talk to him right now. He's not replying. So that's when I thought, why do I even want to go to heaven? I said those words and I can't explain it to you because it's impossible. I said those words and probably about an instant. I can't even say there was time that passed between me asking that question and a response. God literally spoke to me after I said those words. God spoke back to me and said, it's because it's where I am. And I can't describe the moment. I can hardly explain the after effects because it makes no sense. After I heard those words, I just cried for the first time in years. Can't even explain it since probably my grandpa died. And it wasn't just sadness. I mean, there was a hint of sadness that I missed this all my life, but I was crying because there was just so much joy and understanding. I can't explain how it happened. I was in this moment of, I'm 2 steps away from just giving up and saying, even if God exists, I don't care if I go to hell. But when I ask that question, why do I want to go to heaven? And God gives me a response that changed my life in that moment. I could not comprehend what I was feeling. It was just this complete sense of joy and love. And knowing that after all this time, that God was still listening and waiting on this moment for me of truly asking the question, why do I love God? Why am I a Christian? What am I here for? What am I doing this for? And the next morning, I woke up, everything was changed. Like, the sun was brighter. I can't even explain it. I sat up in my bed, I looked out the window, and the sun was there. Like, I can't explain it. Like, light was always there. Obviously, the sun was always shining. But somehow, it felt like I was missing out on life. And I went downstairs, and I was getting ready to make my breakfast, and my sister asked me, "Why are you smiling?" There was no reason. I hadn't smiled for no reason in years. Probably since I was like 3. There was no reason to be smiling, other than what had happened last night. It's impossible to explain it to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's like I'm talking about drugs right now. But that's what happened. I had a joy that has not left me, because that one moment of change, it was my heart, my mind, my soul was full. There was just no, I don't want to say it like eliminated all of my depression, but it pretty much did. It's different for everyone, but in that moment, it was just gone. I can't explain to you more than what I can say in terms that you can understand, which is, when you understand who God is and what God's love is, it changes you in a way that cannot be described. It makes no sense. And that's my evidence. I know that people don't like anecdotal evidence, but that's just why I'm a Christian. I said it a million times before, I can't prove that God exists. There's nothing I can do to prove that God exists. And I could give you all the arguments. I'm learning a lot more now, and there's a million different arguments that you can make, but there's a million different arguments that an atheist can make. It's why so many people are agnostic. They don't want one extreme or the other. But in the pursuit of the truth, I found the truth. And maybe I'm mistaken, but I can say this, I'm not mistaken about the change it's had in my life. So, I know this testimony is a little, lame. It's pretty generic, growing up in a Christian home, the ethereal experience of your come to Jesus moment, but that's what happened. And I want to share it because I'm 21. People in Gen Z do not like God. And not to say that there isn't, because I want to say this right now. There's a testimony that I heard from someone that I think is my age, and I want you guys to go and listen to that one. Like, seriously, I really, really want you guys to go and listen to that testimony, because it is from the perspective of someone who was my age, but did not grow up in a Christian home, did not grow up in a loving home, did not grow up in a good environment, and has a wild testimony. Mine is pretty generic, but it's my testimony. It's mine to tell, and I'll tell it. Even if it might be a little bit boring, a little bit short. And like I said, I think I said this, but I want to do a longer testimony in the future, with a better face cam. Just go more in depth on certain topics, because there's a lot of stuff in my life that did happen, and this is just a testimony for kind of a placeholder, so it's there on my channel, so that anyone who sees one of my videos and is scrolling on my channel can quickly listen to my testimony and get a better understanding of part of my life. But that's what happened. I was saved, and my mindset completely changed. My relationship with God actually existed. I didn't have one with God. I had a relationship with the law. I did not have a relationship with God, and then I did, and that's what changed my heart. Changed my desires. That's why I'm making this channel. I don't really care if anything comes of it, because I have an objective to spread this truth, and I'll do it as best I can, and God will do the rest. Whoever sees this, even if it's nobody, if it's just me speaking, then it's my message to God. Then this is what this channel's about. Just trying to help people my age get a better understanding of Christianity. And there's also going to be other videos on there. I like playing video games, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, after that moment, that was in March of 2021, so it's been over 2 years now. I have done a lot in my life to help me get cleaned up, and basically my mind, my mental state was just not good. So it's helped me change the relationship that I have with a lot of my feelings and desires and why I do things. If you don't have a reason for why you're doing something, then you need the incentive, even just to continue living on. The only reason that I denied my depression and was relatively stable, never really having thoughts about suicide or anything like that, was because my family was there. I said, even if I'm having all these doubts about God, my family's still there. I see the evidence of God in my family. They love me so much that I can't fully deny it. That's really where my heart was through that whole stint. So, but now I'm much, much better. And I thank God for that. And there was some other stuff that happened after I was saved. Nothing too big. Obviously, COVID was kind of big, and I kind of regret not going on campus for college, but since I didn't go on campus, I became a Christian. But then again, if I went on campus, I might not, or I might have still become a Christian. Who knows? But right now, I'm just trying to figure things out. Hoping to work in a church, hoping this channel does something. Don't know if anything's going to happen at all, but I'll work on it. My school's starting up soon, so we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, that's pretty much it for now. Like I said, longer testimony in the future probably. More in depth. There's a lot of stuff in my life that needs to be addressed for, how I changed over the years, but I don't really want to get into all that right now. I just want to get this video out and have it there for people to see. And I did talk about it before, but I'm gonna link it in the description, in the comments, and probably somewhere on the video. This testimony that I saw from this girl, I want every Christian, atheist, agnostic, everyone to watch it, because it shows more of what God can do. Because a lot of atheists that will see this will just say, you became a Christian so that you could hide from your depression, or you became a Christian so you didn't feel like an outcast in your family. But I promise you that's not what happened. It did not go down that way. And you can believe it if you want. But if you do believe that, I want you to go watch this other testimony I'm talking about. And then come back here and tell me if you still feel the same way. Other than that, I'm planning on releasing another video soon-ish. It's going to be about Gen Z, where I think people are at right now in my generation. And we're going to be going all over the fun stuff, the LGBTQ stuff, the mental issue stuff, the social media stuff, the depression. We're going to be going all over that. And if you watch this video and watch the next video, then you'll probably know what's going to happen. I'm going to take a Christian point of view on that, all that stuff. So if you want more Gen Z content and or Christian content from the Gen Z perspective, then I guess subscribe. I know this video isn't going to be very interesting. It's pretty boring, especially since my face isn't in it. Probably going to just be audio with a few pictures. I don't know of what, but there will be something. And yeah, that's pretty much it. See you in the next one.